I'm not usually taken by surprise, but I don't know what you are. My mind has a tendency to grab onto things, turn them over and over again until they make sense. Sometimes it isn't good for me. But that's old news.
When I first saw El Paso Elsewhere, I dismissed it for a simple Max Payne clone. Yeah, I saw PS2 era visuals with a bullet time mechanic and immediately thought to myself, with that price point, I wasn't going to get my money's worth. I was dead wrong. El Paso Elsewhere is fantastic. It has two flaws in my opinion, one big, one minor, which I'll get into. But this is one of the biggest surprises of the year, and if you're looking for a hard-hitting personal narrative that doesn't shy away from mature themes, then I definitely recommend picking up this game. Let's get the easy stuff out of the way first. Gameplay-wise, it's a third-person shooter with bullet time mechanics, and that's pretty much all there is to it. This is a simple game. There's nothing complex or innovative when it comes to the combat, but that's not to say this game won't challenge you. You're going to be thrown into different combat scenarios with a multitude of different enemy types, ranging from slow-moving vampires, leaping werewolves, annoying-ass puppeteers, possessed suits of armor, angels that can one-shot you, and these teleporting spirit bomb enemies that can absolutely obliterate you if you don't pay attention. And I really don't know what to call them. I think they're ghosts or some type of bride manifestation, something, but just know that when you see them, they are going to be moving around the map at high speeds, and if you don't catch them, they will either do a lot of damage or they will kill you. Early on, you'll rarely have more than one enemy type in a given area, but as you progress, El Paso Elsewhere throws the kitchen sink at you, and it expects you to be able to quickly dispatch enemies with a decent variety of weapons. You have dual pistols, a shotgun, grenade launcher, Uzi, and two types of rifles, a bolt action and an automatic. And I just want to say that the automatic rifle was my favorite weapon because it was fantastic for clearing mobs. Like, the damage it did was practically perfect, and it could feel overpowered at times. Make sure you aim for weak spots because different variants of these enemies can become pretty spongy later on, and this can create some pretty intense combat scenarios. Now, there are some bosses in this game, some ranging from incredibly easy to beat to if you don't time your dodges, you will get one shot. The major boss fights in this game can be really unforgiving and will feature multiple phases, and unlike the various levels you'll fight through, the checkpoint system doesn't come into play. If you fail the final phase, you will go back to the beginning of the fight, and because of how relentless and damaging the major bosses can be, it can be fairly frustrating because they move faster, like way faster than regular enemies, so be prepared. Let's talk about the level design in El Paso Elsewhere, and I think the best way to describe it is that it's simple. Almost every level requires you to save innocence and then navigate back to the elevator, which acted as your starting point. When you save that final innocent, you're going to notice that the level will darken. It seems like the void is angry with you, and then they'll throw a couple of different enemies your way. But beyond that, you're going to see exit signs that will help you navigate back to the elevator, so you're never going to get lost. As the game progresses, you're going to be required to collect keys to open doors, and these are going to come in the form of different colored hearts. Now, while the level design is simple, the entity known as the Void is going to constantly throw new twists to keep things fresh. And it's not just when you save innocence. Sometimes you are going through a level expecting something basic, expecting something repetitive and the same, and then you're going through something that feels like Control. So I thought that was really cool, and I think that these change-ups are really welcome because outside of a few scenarios, there are practically no deviations when it comes to gameplay. Now, before I dive into what makes El Paso Elsewhere special, let's get the two most noticeable flaws out of the way. The first is the lack of gameplay variety. Now, I understand that this game was meant to be simple, and the gameplay loop is satisfying because it is a tight third-person shooter. But here's the thing. This game is going to run you around 8 to 10 hours depending on the difficulty. And I understand there are going to be some eyebrows raised because 8 hours isn't long considering that this is a $20 game. But you have to understand, you are doing the same thing in every level. There is literally no change, and regardless of how much I love the story or James, who happens to be the main protagonist, the gameplay was starting to feel stale after 5 hours. You're going to unlock the final weapon during that time frame, and instead of ending shortly after that, there's another 3 hours or so to fight through. So you can imagine how hard it was at times to get through those last couple of hours, because you were essentially doing the same thing. That repetition was starting to get to me because I was expecting something different, some type of platforming, some type of escape section, and there just really wasn't. You'll go through around 70 levels of the same thing, and that can be pretty grating on you. The second flaw is going to be subjective. You're either going to see this as a minor complaint or a major complaint, but the time to complete levels is all over the place. The bulk of them can be completed in under 3 minutes, which is really nice because the gameplay loop is meant to be quick. You are meant to kill enemies, save innocents, grab keys, and escape. That is it. You can do some exploration, but honestly, you will complete most of these levels in under 3 minutes, and that is really nice. But then there are some levels that can take 10 to 15 minutes to complete, and they are literally doing the same thing as the smaller levels. Like I mentioned before, you are going to see small levels that are just basic, easy design that really fit the gameplay loop, and then you're going to see these levels that just feel elongated for no reason. The corridors are longer, and there are less enemies to attack. And while I think the environments are pretty nice to look at, I really feel like the fact that you are creating these longer areas and not having enough combat sections can be pretty frustrating, because that's what the gameplay loop was intended for. So here's the thing. When you look at the game's level design, you're going to realize fairly quickly that it is at its best when enemies are frequently challenging you and you're moving at a quick pace. You should never have to rest until you get to the end. But when you get to these longer, more complex levels, you're going to notice that there are a number of lulls. And this can be pretty frustrating because this is a game that emphasizes precision and speed when eliminating monsters. There is this feeling of satisfaction when you go through a level quickly while also conserving ammo because you were hitting all of your shots. When you have to go through these really long levels and you're thinking to yourself, well, it's got to end eventually, or it's got to end quickly, you're going to start to notice that this is where the gameplay loop just does not complement these types of areas. It's kind of a strange design choice, in my opinion, to have these longer levels lack the same type of intensity as the smaller levels. I really feel like if you had just approached it in the same manner, where enemies are constantly attacking me or ambushing me while I'm trying to make it through, I know that would have been kind of exhausting, but it also makes these levels far more interesting. So I just feel like it's the weirdest thing to not maintain that intensity even in longer levels. I know that it would be tiring to the player, but these levels are meant to be short, quick bursts. Now that we've gotten the flaws out of the way, let's talk about the best part of El Paso Elsewhere, and that is its narrative. On the surface, it's the story of a seasoned monster hunter in James who is looking to stop his ex-girlfriend Janet, and I'm going to butcher this because this is just how they pronounce her name. It's Draculae, and you're stopping her from enacting the apocalypse. So you would think to yourself, this is B-movie stuff, and if this was any other game, you might be right. But the depth here is seriously impressive. James is a fantastic character and one that is easy to empathize and identify with. He's a recovering addict and someone who is constantly questioning his own self-worth. His inner monologues range from hilarious to tragic, and you can see that this is a person who desperately wants to reconnect with his ex, but he knows that doing so could be hazardous. Throughout the entirety of El Paso Elsewhere, you're going to see James struggle to come to grips that the only solution is to kill his ex-girlfriend. And it's harsh, but as you progress through the game, you'll notice that while James is hanging on, there's almost no point. If he even tries to talk to her, it will more than likely fail, and they will end up confronting each other. It feels like a foregone conclusion. She's a vampire, and not just any vampire. Her lineage is so powerful that she will be the cause of the apocalypse. He's a monster hunter. It should be a really simple task. There should be no question about what you have to do, but the problem is, she gave him what he's always desired. Even after learning of her lineage, He didn't see her as a vampire. He didn't see her as a monster. And there are a number of recordings you'll discover that will provide deeper insight into their relationship. For the most part, this seemed like a normal, loving relationship, and Janet and James seemed really content. It becomes evident, however, that James was only hanging on to the good, because you are going to learn quickly that there was a lot of bad. When you start to get halfway through the game, you'll notice that the intermissions, cutscenes, and recordings get fairly dark in nature, especially when it talks about their relationship and how the power dynamic really was. And James only comes to grips with that because he starts to realize that there is no way back for him. And he became addicted to this relationship with Janet because it was the only good in his life. He's a recovering addict. He didn't have a high self-worth. And so he saw this person who really took him for what he was as the one person who would never betray him. And you're probably going to ask yourself a number of times about why he stayed. It should be obvious he should leave and run because he was clearly in danger. But for those of us who have been in toxic or abusive relationships, you'll understand. James grows as a person as the game progresses, and even though the doubt and uncertainty will cloud his judgment throughout the journey, his conviction to do what's right becomes stronger when he begins to reach the end. And that's something I really appreciate, because when you first start with this character, it is clear that he is a reluctant hero, and he remains one, but he becomes a person that he can be proud of. And I think that's just a testament to the writing in this game. I believe that he is such a good character that you will be pulling for him before you reach the midpoint of the game. You don't have to listen to a single recording. You don't have to know anything, in my opinion, about their dynamic, about their relationship. Because there's a point in the game, it's about midway through, maybe less, where James comes to the realization that he never cared about himself. He never put himself first. He never thought about himself in the relationship. He only cared about her well-being, her needs, her wants. That's all he cared about, because if he keeps her happy, then he'll be happy. And when he comes to that realization, I feel like a lot of people are going to sit there and say, I have been in that same situation. I've been in that type of relationship. I understand what James is going through. This is a moody and introspective game, but it is so well written, and I really feel like there are so many standout scenes in this game. I can't really pick a favorite. But here's the deal. It is a damn shame that this game will not be up for any major awards, especially in regard to performance, because the voice acting for James, the performance of James as a character, is nothing short of fantastic, and it's one of the best of the year. In the end, it is clear that El Paso Elsewhere is a throwback. This game is going to prey on your nostalgia because it's a solid third-person shooter with mechanics that are going to heavily remind you of the first Max Payne games. And listen, if that's all you want, then look no further. The only difference is that instead of shooting mafia goons, you're killing monsters. The thing is, what you're getting narratively is something that took me by surprise, and I believe it's one of the reasons why it's sitting at a very high rating on Steam. I don't think anyone playing this game had any expectation that it would feature a narrative that would be as personal as it is, but it's here, and it's a real highlight in what has been a strong year for indie titles. Do yourself a favor and pick up El Paso Elsewhere. And that is going to do it for this video. If you like the content, please consider like, sharing, and subscribing. I'm Ken from Pixelated Thoughts, and I'll talk to you next time.
I think I get it. I'm looking at the end of the world with a lightness in my chest, because I can finally know. Do you know how hard it is? Living good. Dying good is a moment. You do something, you bleed your goodness onto the universal ledger. You're a good person. You know you're a good person. Anyone can die good. I'm doing it. Living good is forever. That's how it feels. Yes to the right things, no to the wrong things. Day after day, choices reinforced bit by painstaking bit. It's like chiseling your soul into a new shape. It's fucking slow. But But here we are. At a hole in the fabric of everything that is. A hole I get to close. I'll have to wake up tomorrow and wonder if I'm going to do the right thing again. James Savage, drug addict, gets to die good. What a mercy.